Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little lamb.
The fall. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Senator, are you suggesting that President Trump pulled the trigger and had Qasem Soleimani killed as a distraction from impeachment?
Look, I think people are reasonably asking about the timing and why it is that the administration seems to have all kinds of different answers. The administration doesn't seem to have a coherent answer for taking a step like that, and they have taken a step that moves us closer to war.
That's exactly right. How complicated is it? The president is in political peril. The president only cares about the president. He only cares about himself. He is deploying troops without their cell phones, by the way, overseas right now. This is a man who promised the MAGA people that he was going to end endless wars in the Middle East. And he just started one because he told Congress, if you impeach me, if you go after me, this will be war. And people didn't want to believe it. They just didn't want to believe it. And that is where we are. And this is where we've been taken by this lunatic, by this maniac. The tweets of this man are the tweets of a madman. Did you see? He tweets, these media posts will serve as notification to the United States Congress that should Iran strike any U.S. person or target, the United States will quickly and fully strike back, and perhaps in a disproportionate manner. Such legal notice is not required, but is given nevertheless. Okay, here's what the War Powers Act actually says. A law he's never read, okay? And there's no one left. There's no adults in the room. There's no one left near the president that is of any intellectual heft, okay? The stupidity in the Trump administration is legendary. It's legion, and it's exponentially increased by the lack of adults in the room to counter the stupidity. All right, so you have that. And then you've got him by tweet saying, the law doesn't apply to me. That's what he's saying. He also threatened to attack 52 cultural sites by tweet. Now, the War Powers Act requires that if the president thinks or has reason to conclude that there's an imminent threat to the United States, he can act, but he is required to notify Congress within 48 hours. And it's not that he's just required to tell them I did it. He's required to provide a legal justification for it. He's required to tell Congress what the intel told him, what the information he had was. You know what the president did? He sent something over to Congress because somebody in the White House, I guess Cipollone, understands the law and said, you got to notify Congress. You can't just tweet this crap out. Okay, you can't just do this. And you got to stop bragging about killing a foreign sovereign nation's number two. That's like taking out, the head of the Navy SEALs or Pompeo. Yeah, it's like that. Hate to say it. But that's what we did. And we did it because on December 29th, we actually took airstrikes in Baghdad against a militia that works with the Iraqi government that was actually admitted to Iraq and codified under Iraqi law in 2016 as being part of the Iraqi forces that would fight ISIS with the Americans. Okay? You might not like that, but that's who that militia is. And that's who that was. And the leader of that militia was also killed in the strike that killed Soleimani, the Iraqi. So we not only killed a leader from Iran, part of the Iranian government, but we killed somebody who was part of the Iraqi government on Iraqi soil where we think we're allied with Iraq. It's just so sick. Anyway, the Trump administration on December 29th killed 25 of those militia guys who were there with the consent of the Iraqi government. And so Then, there were protests. As you saw, there were two sets of protests. But the one that you saw with the yellow flags, that's the militia protest. Okay, those people, after we killed 25 of their militia members, those are the ones that stormed the embassy in the green zone in Iraq. Those were the people that were trying to take down the razor wire and try to get into the embassy. They didn't, but that's what they were doing. They were protesting because we killed 25 of their guys. And that's what the protests with the yellow flags were. The protests with the Iraqi flags that were happening prior to that is ordinary Iraqis protesting corruption in Iraq. Okay, so you had two different things going on. But the yellow flags that breached the compound that went to the embassy, those were part of the militia that we struck at. And they're part of the Iraqi military. It's insane what we did. It makes no sense to anybody. So we killed two people. We killed this guy, Qasem Soleimani, who is head of the Iranian Quds forces, who is the number 2 in Iran, okay? Right after the Ayatollah. And then we killed a guy named Abu Mahdi Mohandes, another guy we never heard of, okay? But now all of a sudden you're going to hear about him. Why? Because he was in charge of that militia, okay? And he was an Iraqi. And we killed him too. Same drone strike. You're not allowed to do that. You can't kill an ally. And apparently the Trump administration knew that he was with Soleimani at the Baghdad airport. And they said that, go ahead anyway. Go ahead anyway. So we attacked 2 countries, 2 of them. How stupid. Twice in 5 days. Twice in 5 days, and they're sitting there. You got Pompeo all over doing the this reminded me of Condi. Remember when Condi Rice and Colin Powell were forced onto the TV? Well, we can't let the smoking gun be a mushroom cloud. Yeah, well, the same thing with Pompeo. He did an Olympiad, right? He did every Sunday show saying there was an imminent threat, and when he was questioned about what was the imminent threat, he couldn't tell us. He wouldn't tell us, and the legal justification and the imminent threat information that was sent to Congress, which is required by law within 48 hours, is classified, which is very unusual because the reason for sending the information to Congress after the fact is for transparency. So Congress can understand that they either need to declare war because that's who has war powers, like it or not. But this man, like I said, he's neutering and hobbling and eliminating all the functions of Congress. And the Republicans enable him. That's a sad thing. Have you heard anybody come to the floor and say, oh, no, like it or not, this man was part of the Iranian government. He wasn't a terrorist. He wasn't a lone actor. He wasn't an independent person. He wasn't, working for some clandestine group. Like it or not, this guy, Mohandes, was part of the Iraqi government, and they were helping us, that militia, fight ISIS in Iraq. That's what they were there for. They were legally there. They were included in Iraqi law. In 2016, they were admitted in, and they were told, yes, help us. So sick what's going on. And America doesn't get the full explanation. All they get is crazy people on the TV telling, he's a terrorist. He had to be eliminated. He's got blood on his hair. Of course he's got blood on. He's a freaking general, for God's sake. He's a general. It's what generals do. They plan. They don't execute. I mean, this guy that we killed, Soleimani, he's not an executor. He's an architect. He's a guy who plans battles. You might not like it, but if you didn't like it, you should have advocated to stay in the nuclear deal. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.